I think the personification of mice beyond my peers and beyond the folks in '93, which was the best class ever, of course, right, was the director at the time, Bill Ramsey. And I'll tell you that my interactions with Bill shaped what I thought the leader of a program that was so special to me should be. Because he was someone who was, very much kind of the model of a military man in my ways, I would say. He was sort of very, very, very formal in some senses in the office, but in a loving way. And that was very much like my father, who was an Air Force man, who stern and loving. And I remember us trying very hard not to get to Bill's office, because at that time you had a meal card, and if you had a certain amount of money on your meal card for the whole program, and if you used it up, you had to go talk to the director and explain why you used it up. And our job was to not have to explain why we spent all of our money. And there were lots of conversations on how, and in retrospect, I feel like maybe we should have announced it out in a different way, but here's your money, and if it's gone, then how are you going to eat? So we had lots of conversations about this. How do we stay out of Mr. Ramsey's office? But what I remember is sort of this individual who personified James Russell Lowell's poem, or his article that he published in the Boston Courier in 1845. In opposition to the war with Mexico at the time, James Russell Lowell, who was a great New Englander, wrote this poem that sort of ended with, "Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, and yet that scaffold sways the future." He ends it by saying, "Standeth God within the shadows, keeping watch over his own." And whether or not, regardless of your religious affiliations, you can take that one word out and just talk about that force that stands in the shadows and sort of keeps watch over their own. That, to me, was Bill Ramsey, an individual who was a great father figure, who didn't have to be in the spotlight, but was always there making sure that things were running smoothly, and that the students were having a great experience, and they were learning something. They were staying out of trouble for the most part, and they weren't spending too much of their money from the lunchroom. That was the epitome of what I would define as a quiet mentor. Some of you may know that mentor is a term that comes from Greek mythology. In fact, from your Greek mythology, you'll know that Odysseus went on his journey, and while he was away on his journey, his son Telemachus was there, and he was in danger. Penelope, his wife, his journey extended pretty long because he made a couple of wrong turns here and there and got into a few issues. But he wanted to make sure that his son could grow up to be a good king. So he left Mentor in charge of Telemachus' development as a king. And Mentor watched over Telemachus. The suitors for Penelope would have been great kings if they could just get rid of this kid Telemachus. So Mentor's job was partly protector, partly teacher, because you have to learn and grow to be a good king. And at some point, Telemachus got so happy with the relationship with Mentor and where he was, that he said, "I'll just stay." And Mentor said, "No, it's time for you to go. Go out and search for your dad." I think a good mentor not only helps you to grow and protects you a bit, but then sort of tells you when to go from the nest. I remember my first hearing of an island called St. Kitts, and it was from Bill Ramsey. I think one of the times, I didn't see him smile very much, but I think one of the times I saw him smile the most was when he talked about St. Kitts and his plans to retire there. And I remember my last interactions with Mr. Ramsey were in this fall of my freshman year, just before he had planned to retire. And certainly he didn't make it there, but I saw him that semester, and I sort of waved my hand and said, "Mr. Ramsey, I'm here. And he said, "You're one of mine, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah. A MICE program got me here, and I'm thrilled." And he said, "Good. We don't make mistakes." And I've told that to every student that I've encountered. We've identified potential in you, and whether or not you realize that potential is partly your job to activate. But we don't make mistakes when we identify that potential. And I feel that when, in my time as director, and I'll give you the story on how I came to be the director, I try very hard to channel my own version of Bill Ramsey in my interactions with the students.